It's time for the Josh Kirby on Sports Podcast.
On this edition of the Josh Kirby on Sports Podcast, we have another exciting week of the National Football League to talk about. Exciting upsets and close games all around. We will also be talking about Colin Kaepernick and also fantasy football files with Jason Kamlowski. All that and so much more. Make sure you stay tuned.
I'm glad you connected. This is Dave Johnson, voice of the Washington Wizards. You have connected to the right place because you are listening to my man, Josh Kirby, on Sports Podcast.
All righty, back with you with another edition of the Josh Kirby on Sports Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Josh Kirby, if you didn't know but that by now by the name of my podcast, LOL. But anyways, we are part of the Mayo Please Podcast Network. Make sure you check them out on Twitter and Instagram at the Mayo Please and at Mayo Please Sports. And we are also sponsored by Route 11 Chips. Make sure you find the bag today inside your local Martin's, Food Lion, and Giant stores. And we are also sponsored by PM Plus Reserves. As always, want to give a big thanks to Dave Johnson, JR Beats Official, and MPT Now Productions. So another jam-packed episode for you. We have a lot of stuff, including news that dropped today as we are recording on Tuesday, the 12th of November. But before we do, I want to bring in, as always, our contributor to the Josh Kirby on Sports Podcast, Dan Dembski. Dan, pretty exciting game down in Blacksburg to cap off the homestand for the Virginia Tech Hokies, the last home game for Bud Foster. So tell us a little bit about covering that game for the paper down in Blacksburg.
Well, it's the second to last home game. I'll correct you on that.
Oh,
Why they picked this game to have sort of the final thing for Bud Foster was odd to me. But it was a lot of fun, Josh. Got to sit up in the press box and watch a very close and nail biting first half. Of course, it was 10-6 at halftime, and we just came out in the second half and probably played our best half of football yet this year. And you know how the defense just played so well, forcing two turnovers, two key turnovers in the third and fourth quarter that really help the offense especially, and we scored a decent amount in the second half. So it was a very fun game to cover, Josh. A pretty big upset for the Hokies, and of course, everyone was happy during the post-game press conference, especially Coach Fuente and Bud Foster. They were pretty thrilled with how the game turned out for obvious reasons.
yeah. So the way it's looking now, are we seeing Virginia Tech maybe going bowl eligible, or what's the scenario going on with that towards the end of the college football regular season?
Well, yeah, they've got a pretty good shot to not only be bowl eligible, Josh, but win their side of the ACC. Let me pull up the standings here real quick. You asked me sort of quickly, so I believe Virginia Tech is in second right now. Give me just a minute. I'll get that here for us. But I believe we need just 2 wins to be bowl eligible. We have to have 7 this season because of scheduling 2 FCS teams, which only one counts towards the overall record. What the heck? Okay, here we go. Yeah, we're 6-3. We actually need one more win to lock up bowl eligibility and only one win behind UVA, who is played kind of up and down. We have a big game coming up on the road against Georgia Tech this coming up weekend. Then we host Pittsburgh, which that Pittsburgh game, they have the same overall record that we do. So and they have the same conference record. So that's one that people are going to circle, and that's one we're going to come back to and talk about, I'm sure, a lot down here in Blacksburg for the next couple weeks until that happens. But yeah, it's been an intense season. The coastal side of the ACC has been very unpredictable, with teams really shifting back and forth, and that's been the overall thing again and again. Has been just how exciting and how unpredictable it's been, Josh. And I think it's going to continue to stay that way. But right now Virginia Tech kind of controls their own destiny. UVA kind of has an easier schedule from here on out. They this week. Give me a second here. Scrolling. Computer's being slow. They have a bye week this coming up weekend, and then next weekend they play host to Liberty before they have Virginia Tech, of course, in the usual Black Friday, November 29th slot. So they basically have 2 weeks to prepare now for Virginia Tech, which is pretty nerve-wracking when you think of it. But yeah, Tech controls their own destiny. I think they have a pretty good chance to win out at this point, and that might be what they have to do to win the Coastal Division and have a shot to play Clemson in the ACC championship game right now.
Well, very good insight from our Blacksburg reporter, Dan Dembski. You can follow him on Twitter at Dan the VT Man 97. So Dan, continuing a little bit, still with ESPN Blacksburg, I am assuming covering volleyball. Just give an update to the listeners about how that is going for you.
Yeah, it's actually winding down. The season's almost over now. It's a couple more weeks left, and then I have about 2 more weeks left of my internship after that. So right now the plan is for me to cover women's basketball just for those last couple weeks before we hit Christmas break, and another semester another semester's in the books. So that's the plan right now. But I'm really enjoying it, man. I'm getting a chance to sit in the press row for these games. I've been live tweeting a lot of them. Sometimes I have, sometimes I haven't. But then getting a chance to talk about it on the air and have some fun with it. That's been the big thing this semester that I've really enjoyed, and that's really what being on the radio is all about. You have to do your research, but you get to have a little bit of fun with it, and I certainly have so far. So you can check out all my segments on the ESPN Blacksburg website if you head on over there and just find Dan Dembski Volleyball. I'm on there several times. I usually am on there once a week. I'm not on there this week, and I've taken a couple weeks off because they've had some road games. But I've really enjoyed it, and I hope to continue next semester keep doing similar things with other sports. So yeah, I hope it goes well.
Yeah, well, that's always great to hear. Dan succeeding pretty well down there, and
I appreciate it.
And once you come back up here for Thanksgiving break, I'm sure you will be coming on the show a lot. So I'm really looking forward to that because we've been doing more of these phone conferences, but face to face is even better. So
absolutely.
Yeah, we'll be getting Dan on more and more as Thanksgiving break winds down, but that's about all for the segment for Virginia Tech Hokie sports that Dan covers. And we're going to move on to some other action. Before we begin, how about number 1 Kentucky getting a loss against Evansville? I've never even heard of this school, Evansville, and they beat Kentucky by 3 points.
Yeah, that was shocking. I think I shared it on Twitter and just said, "What?" Yeah, that's surprising considering Kentucky, had a huge top five victory just last week to start the season off. I think was clearly one of the best teams in college basketball. A lot of people thought coming in, and this is a team you're supposed to beat, pretty handily. Um, so that's a big loss. I think it's early enough in the season to where it's not going to crush your entire year, but certainly it's not it's not what you have in mind when you schedule a team like Evansville. And I had to look too, Josh. I did not think that they were a real team. I had to double check, and that's never a good sign. So um, you got to give credit where credit's due. Evansville led pretty much the whole game from what I had read, and they really just dominated and just outplayed Kentucky. By the way, Kentucky, the line in this game was favored, obviously, in Kentucky's way. They were 24 and a half point favorites over Evansville. So give credit where credit's due, man. Evansville is in the Missouri Valley Conference, which, again, I didn't think existed. But it goes to show you never know. A lot of teams schedule those, especially in college sports, schedule those cupcake games, and you expect the team to come out and just dominate. And, for Kentucky, they got absolutely stunned in their home buildings. So that's a huge loss. Like I said, I don't know if it ruins their whole season, but certainly they have a lot of work to do to prove to people that they can be competitive, especially at home, losing to Evansville, a team they were favored by nearly 25 to take down. So give a ton of credit to Evansville. They came out, they played really good defense, and they earned the victory. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, looking at some of these stats I'm looking at here, they're pretty, consistent between each other. Like field goal percentage, 23 for 60, and Kentucky had 20 for 54, and the
Yeah,
field percentage is 38.3 and 37. So pretty similar numbers. Your 3-point percentage, 30 to 23, going to Evansville, and assists 10 to 6 Evansville. Similar stats, but what really stands out to me is the largest lead in the game for Evansville was only 8 points. Kentucky's largest lead was only 3 points. So,
yeah, that. Sorry about that.
yeah, so very interesting to see there. Just such an upset game so early in the college football season. But I just wanted to bring that up to you all because I just found out about it like a couple hours ago as we were recording. So
Yeah,
moving, yeah, moving right along here now, it's time for a topic that has been released today as well. Colin Kaepernick is hosting a workout on Saturday. No media, no reporters are allowed. It's very strictly private, confidential to all 32 teams in the NFL. Kaepernick tweeted, I'm quoting his tweet, "I'm just getting word from my representatives that the NFL league office reached out to them about a workout in Atlanta on Saturday. I've been in shape and ready for this for 3 years. Can't wait to see the head coaches and GMs on Saturday." My thoughts on this starting out, I know Kaepernick has been on a long hiatus from the NFL. I'm not going to really go into much detail, but he has been out of the league for a while. But in my opinion, before he exited the league the way he did, he really, his performance, in my opinion, was not the best. But yeah, 3 years off. Do you think Kaepernick has what it takes to rejoin the league as a quarterback?
oh, that's tough. He his career stats are really good. He had 72 touchdowns and 30 interceptions. Um, he's played in 69 games in his career, and obviously he's been away for 3 years now. I think the big question is how well has he stayed in shape? He states he stayed in shape, but it's a wonder if he stayed in football shape, because there's a big difference between being in shape and being in football shape and being ready to go now. And that's the big question mark for me right now. I think he can play, and he can certainly be a backup quarterback for just about any team in this league. Um, I think he's better than a lot of backups in the league. But again, it comes back to, is he ready to go? He says he is. We're going to find out, um, and it'll be interesting to see, what head coaches and what GMs show up, because I do think there will be an attraction there, because at the end of his career, his last season in the NFL, wasn't it wasn't perfect. He had 16 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, but his worst statistical season was the year before, six touchdowns and 5 picks. So even that's not too awful. I certainly think, based off the numbers, he can play. But again, being away from the game for so long, will he be able to step back in and play after being out for 3 seasons? That's really difficult to do. Now, if he were a year or two removed, if he was a year removed, I'd definitely say he's got an opportunity, because guys can come back all the time that are out of season. But we'll see just how well this workout goes. And again, I think there'll be a lot of GMs and a lot of head coaches there to take a look to see, if he can play the position. I think he can, but again, I don't know what kind of shape he's in. And I also don't know what kind of backlash this might have too, unfortunately. Um, I feel like a lot of the people who were against what he started the kneeling thing. Of course, that's the only time I'm going to bring it up. I feel like a lot of those folks have already stopped watching the NFL, who really didn't care for it. So it'll be interesting to see that side of it too, if he does come back, if he does get an offer from another team. So we'll see, Josh. I think it's way too early to speculate. Again, we don't know what kind of shape he's in. We don't know if he'll be um, straight off the docket ready to play. That'll be the interesting thing moving forward.
Yeah, honestly, I'm just looking at this from a quarterback and is he ready to go standpoint, with all the political views and all the backlash out the door. I
Yeah.
feel like Colin Kaepernick can be a backup for just about any
Oh yeah.
team in the league. I can see so many different teams and so many different scenarios where Colin Kaepernick could be on a team, but I just know there's some people don't like him. But this is strictly a standpoint on another quarterback in the league. So I'm just clearing that up. But
Yeah, I agree.
yeah, but it's going to be interesting to see on Saturday, right before a slate of Sunday games in Week 11, how many teams and how many GMs or who's going to show up to this workout in Atlanta. It's going to be really interesting to see if it will be a big turnout for Colin Kaepernick, to see if a team maybe wants to sign him.
Yeah, and it's odd timing too to have it on a Saturday, and that's a good point too. A lot of these coaches, especially coaches, on Saturdays is usually their biggest day for preparation, their final day for preparation. So yeah, that's a good point. It'll be interesting to see who shows up, and who wants to see what he can do, and who takes the time out of their schedule to do it. Those are all valid questions. I think that we'll just have to wait until Saturday to see if they're answered.
Yep. So we'll bring you more news to obviously see if Colin Kaepernick gets signed, but if there are any new developments from that as well. But for the time being, we have another exciting edition of an NFL recap, Week 10 for you. And Dan, there were a lot of upsets this week, a lot. And I'm not really sure where to begin in this. I mean, Atlanta and New Orleans, in my opinion, was one of the biggest shocker games. Beating New Orleans at home. And that was crazy, because I thought, oh man, Drew Brees is getting comfortable in the scenario, and coming back from injury, but Drew Brees doesn't even put up a touchdown.
No, give credit to the Falcons defense. They really dialed up the pressure on him. I thought, and had him really running for his life the entire game. So give a ton of credit to the Falcons defense. Yeah, that's a shocking game. And how about Alvin Kamara, Josh? Only 24 yards rushing. Again, credit Atlanta's defense. On the offensive side of the ball, Atlanta had some pretty good play from Matt Ryan, who threw for a buck 82 and 2 touchdowns. But it's normal offensive output for the Falcons. But what was different was how the defense absolutely stifled this Saints offense that's been so explosive week after week. And this is a wake up call game, I think, for the Saints. You know, they're seeing that maybe we're not as good as we thought we were, and this could be a game where their whole mentality shifts and they start to have this sort of after the Falcons game mentality where they start to come out and really put teams away. We'll see if that has an effect, but yeah, that was a shocking game, Josh. I couldn't believe the score. I was watching that one live. I think I saw most of it, and that was certainly probably the biggest upset of the season so far, I'd say.
Yeah, holding the Saints to 9 points at home, that's shocking. And the Falcons were only 1-7. So one big shocker, and shout out to Dan Gloucester and Ken Presley. The Ken's the host of the Survivor pool I'm in. 3 people picked New Orleans in our Survivor pool to win, and Atlanta knocked them out. So moving on to another interesting game. Cleveland shocks Buffalo at home, and Buffalo had a chance to win, but their field goal was blocked. And Josh Allen once again not throwing a touchdown, excuse me, but it looked like another one of those close games where it could go either way.
Yeah, you got to give credit to the Browns in a lot of ways. This was a tough matchup for them coming in. I think a lot of people picked Buffalo simply by the fact that Buffalo's played so well, um, but you got to give credit to Cleveland. They really played well at home, and I don't like to give Cleveland credit because obviously, as you know, I'm not a Cleveland person. But Nick Chubb ran the ball well, and I think that's really where it started with the Browns. You know, Baker Mayfield is not going to be able to throw it 50 times a game and lead them to a win. I think he needs, especially he's still developing as a quarterback. You know, he's got to have a strong running game to start, and Nick Chubb certainly was a huge part of that with his 116 yards on the ground. And that sort of opened things up for Cleveland. Only 19 points, but the Browns defense played very well, Josh. They really did everything they had to do to slow down Josh Allen and this Buffalo offense that you know is not a high scoring, high rolling offense. They can get some points, but it was a complete effort for Cleveland, of course, even special teams. So they earned the win, and that's a hard fought win for them when they really needed one at home. So
Yeah, I do want to make a correction. That was actually a missed field goal, not a field goal by Steven Hauschka. He made a he made a 53-yard field goal earlier, and that field goal he missed was from 34 yards. So but the game I was going to talk about that had a blocked field goal at the end of the game was the Tennessee Kansas City game with Patrick Mahomes back in. And my thoughts on this one was Patrick Mahomes fully ready to go back into action after being injured the past couple of games. And they play, and their backup quarterback played pretty well in place of Patrick Mahomes. But was Pat Mahomes ready to get thrown into a game and the Chiefs are now 6-4 after that loss. So questioning whether how playoff implications look now after this loss, but I I'm not sure if Pat Mahomes was completely ready to step back into action.
I would say yes. He threw for almost 450 yards, and threw 3 touchdowns. So, I think he was ready, Josh. But you got to give credit to Tennessee. I mean, they were able to keep up very well on the scoreboard. And how about Ryan Tannehill? Played pretty darn well, 13 of 19 with 2 touchdowns. I think Pat Mahomes is ready. I just think Kansas City's not as good as everyone says they are, Josh. And maybe this is another situation of a wake-up call game um, with a young team, playing a young team like the Titans. And the Chiefs didn't play their best football. That's for sure. Um, but on the stat sheet, it really favors Kansas City. It was just a matter of the fact that the Tennessee was able to force a couple more turnovers. I think fumbles, if I'm not mistaken. I just saw one. Um, so excuse me. The Chiefs outgained the Titans by 530 yards to 371. But at the end, it was that fumble by Kansas City early that kind of hurt them late in the game.
Yep.
How about Ryan Tannehill had that touchdown pass with just 23 seconds left, so he deserves a ton of credit for stepping in for Marcus Mariota. A lot of people, probably didn't give Tennessee a huge chance to win for obvious reasons when you don't have your star quarterback, but I think I don't know if there's a quarterback controversy brewing in Tennessee, in Nashville, but there might be. It just depends on consistency and if Ryan Tannehill can keep up this pace. But Derrick Henry also had a great game. Josh almost rushed for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. So the Titans did everything they had to do. They forced turnovers. They ran the ball well, and they let Ryan Tannehill do what he can do sometimes. It's just a matter of if they can keep it going. I just don't know. That division, the AFC South, is really interesting to see who's gonna take the bull by the horns, because there really hasn't been a clear favorite right now. Every time someone pulls away, they end up losing. So that division is interesting to me. So I think the Chiefs will be able to learn from this and get better, but it's obvious that they're not the same team they were a season ago, and they're
Yeah.
not as explosive. They're not as the defense especially is not as good, Josh, that they were a season ago. Think of how good their defense was last year, and it's just not the same. So, that's certainly my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, the Chiefs do not look the same, and it's going to be a big wake up call to see how they handle this adversity moving on to the next week. But another game I want to talk about, the Steelers defense forcing havoc on the Los Angeles Rams, dropping the Rams to 5-4. Another wake up call for this Rams team who made it to the Super Bowl last year, and now they're 5-4. But I have to talk about Minka Fitzpatrick here. He's
Mm-hmm.
just doing incredible things since getting traded from Miami to Pittsburgh. The Steelers defense as a whole played exceptionally well. And the saying, defense wins championships. And the defense in this game won the Steelers the ball game.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Josh. Anytime you give up 12 points, there's a pretty good chance you're going to win the football game, and especially against an offense coming in for the Rams that a lot of people just assumed was going to be able to score 35 or 40 points in this game. Jared Goff, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, did not play well, and you got to give credit to the Pittsburgh defense. I'll tell you what, the Steelers are an interesting team to me. They're probably not going to make the playoffs, but they certainly here recently have played really solid football. And again, that's something that pains me to say, being a Ravens fan. But they certainly have played very well. And for a team, there was talk of Mike Tomlin. If you can remember, it was only a couple weeks ago where they a lot of people just kind of figured Mike Tomlin was done in Pittsburgh, that it was over, that his longtime sort of playoff successes in the past, and that wasn't going to change the fact that he was going to get fired. He's got them playing well right now, and especially that defense that the last 3 or 4 seasons has really been weak. The offense is not great. The offense is not where you want it to be right now. You only scored 17 points, but you kept them off the scoreboard after the first quarter, and you kept them out of the end zone, I should say, after the first quarter. So the Pittsburgh defense deserves a ton of credit. They're really playing with a lot of heart. I mean, they're missing obviously Ben Roethlisberger. Mason Rudolph really came into a tough situation, and they've played extremely well. And it'll be interesting to see how Pittsburgh plays down the stretch, because that was supposed to be a tough game for them. But excuse me, they deserve a ton of credit. And the Rams, this kind of chimes in kind of with the Chiefs as well, but the Rams are just not the same football team. We've seen them in a couple games this year where they really just have played poorly. And this is another example, especially Jared Goff, who is supposed to be the answer for them at quarterback. We'll see if he can get it together. But yeah, the Rams have a lot of question marks right now, Josh, going forward. And they have Chicago coming up this weekend on Sunday Night Football. That's going to be an interesting matchup to see kind of where they are. They desperately need that win. That's a home game too. So we'll see if they can get it going again. I just don't see them being a Super Bowl threat right now, especially with losses. There was 3 in a row in October, Josh, when they lost to the Buccaneers, the Seahawks, and the 49ers all in consecutive weeks. And that's kind of where the downfall has been so far. But, like I said, Pittsburgh playing great football right now. Not very great offensively, but defensively they're certainly starting to put it together. And Micah Fitzpatrick, of course, forcing a lot of bad throws, ending up in interceptions in his favor. So I talked a lot about that game. I'm sorry. I'll shut my trap now.
Yeah, but Mike Tomlin, he's a good football coach. I don't care what anybody else says. Mike Tomlin knows how to coach a football team. Even if the Steelers are bad, Mike Tomlin's going to find a way to win. Sometimes they'll lose, and he takes credit for the loss, and he is a good head coach. He owns up to what he has done, the mistakes he's made, and they move on and they find a way to win a football game. That's the last I'm going to say on this game, but credit to Mike Tomlin and the Steelers defense on getting the win this week. Moving right along, Indianapolis and Miami, questionable calling. I'm not sure who calls the plays for Indianapolis's offense, but towards the end of the game, I saw at least 1 or 2 long passes into the end zone that were incomplete. And then on 4th down, the Colts, to try to win the game, threw it short of the first down marker, and the Dolphins ended up winning, getting their 2nd win of the season. And Colts, as you know, Jacoby Brissett was out. Brian Hoyer was in place of Jacoby Brissett, throwing 204 yards and a touchdown, but 3 interceptions. That's what's going to do it for you. The 3 interceptions in that game, in my opinion, just set the Colts back, and the Dolphins played decent. It was just a game of 2 lower end teams keeping it close, in my opinion, but turnovers were the main factor in this one against the Dolphins for Indianapolis, and they got their 2nd win of the season.
Yeah, that was an ugly game to say the least. The Colts really just played poorly, especially on offense. Brian Hoyer I'm not sure if the expectation was coming in. I can't remember the last time he started a game. It's been a while for him. But yeah, he really had a rough day. Like you said, the interceptions. Anytime you give another team, free opportunities, you're definitely going to hurt your chances. So um, we'll see what happens going forward. Like I said, the Colts are in an interesting division. The Dolphins. I think I'm not going to say it's a lucky win, but certainly they had a lot of gifts given in this game. I felt, and not really sure how long Jacoby Brissett's going to be out. He might play next week. Apparently, he sat out because Frank Reich, the head coach, wanted him to make sure he was okay, and they weren't sure. So that's kind of a question mark moving forward if he's going to play. If Brian Hoyer plays again next week, it's going to be tough for them to win no matter what. Um, we'll see, but 12 points is not going to get it done, especially when you wait until the third and fourth quarter to finally score. Um, so the Colts have a lot of questions. I think the defense is fine. They only give up 16 points. So, I mean, there was a lot of low-scoring games this week. There were several low-scoring games in the NFL, which is really bizarre. Marlon Mack didn't play terribly. He had 74 yards on 19 attempts. But when you have a guy like Hoyer in a quarterback, Josh, you got to lean on the run first. And the Colts couldn't get that done. And unfortunately, they got in their own way more times than not with the turnovers.
Yeah. So that it was just one of those games, and I just thought the Colts had more potential, but with Jacoby Brissett out, Brian Hoyer, just another backup. He's played for New England, but just not a good game in general. Almost out of time on this segment. Want to run through a couple more close games, upsets, just really quick. The Oakland Raiders on that Thursday night game. What a ball game. The Chargers coming up just short, 26-24. Oakland's last primetime game at home. Very interesting on both sides of the ball. Great numbers put up by both teams, but Oakland just came away with the win. And my pick in my survivor pool that did not come up well, Matthew Stafford and the Detroit Lions. Matthew Stafford ruled out shortly before they played the Bears, and the Bears beat the Lions, which I sort of want to call an upset, but with Matthew Stafford out, I was sort of expecting it. 20-13 the score in that game. I'm not sure if you wanted to chime in really quick on any of those two games, Dan.
I just want to commend the play of Mitchell Trubisky. He played really well. 3 touchdown passes, and he's not playing a proficient defense, an elite defense by any stretch of the imagination, but he certainly played solid football. Just 7 incomplete passes too. So I give him credit. Maybe this helps him get the monkey off his back. It helps when you're playing Jeff Driscoll on the other side, who, to be honest, I have not heard of him. So that definitely helped the Bears' chances to win that football game. Those divisional games, a lot of times they're a toss-up, especially in that specific division. And then I just want to give credit to the Raiders, especially on defense, forcing Phillip Rivers to make 3 bad throws and 3 interceptions, which ultimately made the difference. Just a 2-point victory for the Raiders. But, John Gruden appears to, he inherited a really bad situation, a really bad football team. He's squeaking out some of these wins, and they're above 500 right now, which at this point in the season surprises me to say the least. So you got to give credit to John Gruden, what he's been able to do with this Oakland Raiders football team. Doing just enough to win, and that's what it takes. And that's another division that's kind of interesting as well, the AFC West. A lot of teams with similar records this year, so we'll see how that one shapes up. Obviously, The Chiefs are going to be the favorite right now. They still are, even with that loss this past Sunday. But watch out for the Raiders here in a couple years. They might be a sneaky team. Um, I'm not sure if Derek Carr is the answer long term. He's had some tough seasons, but we'll see. We'll see the rest of this season and for the rest of the future if they decide to go with him or whatever the case may be. But John Gruden certainly has done a decent job so far there in Oakland.
All right, moving right along, Dan. Your Ravens get the win over the 0-9 Cincinnati Bengals. Lamar Jackson looked like an animal out there, and RG3 with an interception.
Yeah, RG3, I believe it was only his first or second pass, whatever it was. Yeah, it was intercepted. They had a nice little drive going there, Josh. They did a couple of RPOs, and then RG3 threw it right to the Bengals defender. But other than that, it was like a perfect game for the Ravens. Probably the happiest I've been in a long time. Lamar Jackson, his numbers speak for themselves: 15 to 27, 223 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. And then, of course, 7 rushes for 65 yards and a touchdown as well. So, it's the Ravens, I think, are contenders right now. They've proven that. I thought they proved it after
most
their.
definitely. I'm sorry to interrupt, but most definitely contenders to win this division.
Yeah, and I think they can run at the Super Bowl right now. It's still early. We're just over halfway through the season now. But they crushed the Patriots on Sunday Night Football last weekend, and this was a game where they really had to come out and just dominate, and they did that from start to finish, and it really was never close. They have a fun one this weekend. They have the Texans, so we'll see. We'll see how they fare in that one. But Lamar is unbelievable right now. I'm not gonna lie, it still makes me nervous when he runs the football. I'm afraid he's gonna get hurt. I'm afraid he's gonna take a big hit. So far, so good. That spin move, Josh. You probably saw it, right?
He's a cheat code.
Oh my gosh, two defenders ran into each other. That's an MVP caliber highlight right there. So, it's going to be interesting. I hope he can continue this play. We'll see. So, that was probably the most dominant performance I've seen the Ravens have in a long time. Because for years they have never had this kind of offense, and now they have it, and it's great to see.
All right, moving on. Other close games in Week 10 action: 34-27, the New York Jets over the New York Giants in the Clash of New York. Tampa Bay over Arizona, 30-27, and two more close games I want to briefly talk about. Minnesota and Dallas. Minnesota beats Dallas 28-24. Dallas goes behind by 2 touchdowns, trying to catch up, but falling short 28-24 after a Hail Mary picked off by Minnesota. And I told you last week this would be the game of the week, the Monday night matchup between Seattle and San Francisco. San Francisco missed a late kick in overtime, and Seattle's kicker comes back and answers the bell. 27-24 in overtime, Seattle over San Francisco.
Yeah, and that's the game of the week as far as I was concerned. That was a good call, Josh, for you to say that a week ago, that was going to be the game to watch. But all you had to do was see the records and the two teams were playing and realize that was going to be a special game, and it lived up to the hype. And it certainly was the best Monday night game of the season thus far. So Seattle's a really, really, really good football team right now, and so is San Francisco. Those two teams, I think, are Super Bowl contenders. Russell Wilson and Jimmy Garoppolo both had similar stats. They both had a touchdown, but they each had an interception too. So it wasn't the huge high scoring performance that I think we kind of expected in that game. But give credit where credit's due, man. The 49ers scored 14 in the fourth to take it to overtime, and then Of course, they really missed that kick really badly. Um, but it didn't matter to me who was going to win this game because I still think both these teams are going to be high seeds in the AFC and the NFC or the NFC, I should say. I misspoke. But this is going to be a really fun race down to the finish in the NFC West to see if Seattle or San Francisco can pull ahead in that division. Right now, of course, San Francisco leads, but it's going to be close. And the second matchup for these two teams could mean huge playoff implications going forward. And I can't wait to tune into it.
Yeah, I mean, this game was filled with turnovers, and I think that's what made it very close. Like, there were a few interceptions, a couple fumbles forced by each team, but it was a really fun game.
Absolutely agree. And I think when they play again, it's going to be fun as well.
Yeah, most definitely. But teams on bye weeks this week: the Broncos, the Eagles, the Jaguars, the Patriots, the Redskins, and the Texans. And one last nugget from the Washington Redskins: Dwayne Haskins has been named the starting quarterback for the rest of this season. So I don't even know what this means for Washington. If you want to try to figure out what the Redskins are trying to do, Dan, feel free to let me know.
I can't figure it out, man. To be fair, I don't know if he's the answer or if they need to keep putting Case Keenum out there because both of them, when they've played, have played pretty poorly this season. I felt.
Look, Case Keenum led the Vikings to an NFC Championship game. He played excellent in
2 years ago. That was 2 years ago, though. Quarterbacks change, and look at the system he was in Minnesota. He had a ton of receivers. He had a great running back. What does he have in Washington? He's got no offensive line. He's got no receivers. He's got no running back. You can't just get one player and expect all that to change. You have to build around it. And the problem for the Redskins is they've never been able to do that. They've never been able to build since Dan Snyder's been there. They've never been able to build a high-powered or prolific offense.
Yeah, I understand that, but but looking back to week one, when the Redskins got upset by the Eagles. You know how the Redskins put like 17 up in the first half, and then the Eagles came out and stunned them. Case Keenum had 380 yards and 3 touchdowns that game. That's the Case Keenum I saw, and I was like, man, if we can keep that production up, we're looking pretty good. 221 yards and 2 touchdowns in the second game against the Cowboys. Then around week 3, I want to say, we started going off the rails. Case Keenum threw 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions on Monday Night Football against the Bears. Granted, that was Monday night, and the Redskins never play well on Monday night. But
yeah,
I mean, then Case Keenum, just is terrible, and Dwayne Haskins gets put in. And that was basically the turning point. But Case Keenum was putting up numbers. So I'm not really sure what happened, if it was a mental thing, but it turned into a quarterback controversy in Washington. That's all I'm going to say about it.
Well, that game against the Giants, where they lost 24-3, was really the turning point for him. Just 6 of 11 for 37 yards and an interception. The week before, he threw for almost 300 more yards than that. So for us, or for me, that's really was the turning point for him. But he's never been a guy in his career who's really thrown a lot of touchdown passes. He had that great year in 2017 with like we mentioned with Minnesota. But he had a great offensive line. He had a great running back. He had great receivers. You put great players at those positions for an average quarterback, and he's going to look like a Super Bowl caliber quarterback. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, I know that, but with Case Keenum, I saw those numbers of the first 2 games, even though Washington lost, and I was like, this is a quarterback we can work with.
Yeah, no, I agree. I definitely agree with that. I especially when you throw for almost 400 in week 1, and then 221 yards in week 2. Yeah, you expect that to continue, but the problem is it's usually not going to. You just don't expect to take a thud like he did in week 4, where he threw for 37 yards.
Yeah.
That's a slap in the face, and that hurts the football team. But the Redskins have a ton of questions, not just at the quarterback position. They have a particular question about their owner. There was a rumor about Jeff Bezos. Did you see this?
I don't think it's true, because I saw something saying Dan Snyder is keeping the Redskins, but
No. Yeah, I saw that. I saw that today. But if Jeff Bezos does buy an NFL team, that's going to be interesting. So that's just something to keep in the back of our minds. He wants to buy an NFL team, possibly.
Yeah,
So,
that's something for a later episode. But week 10, that's your
Sorry.
recap. We're gonna take a quick break, send it to Jason Kamlowski and Fantasy Files. Me and Dan will return in just a moment. Stay tuned for Fantasy Files.
All right, guys, welcome back to Fantasy Football Files for Week 10. This is Jason Kamlowski on the Josh Kirby podcast. Just you can find me on Twitter at Jason Kamlowski. Also write for Dynasty Football Digest. Kind of give you guys a scoop on that every week. Just talk about Week 10 a little bit. Kind of a interesting week with a couple upsets. Obviously, the Dolphins going into Indianapolis and winning against the Colts. Colts looked awful. Brian Hoyer looked absolutely terrible. It sounds like Jacoby Brissett will be back this week. Steelers beating the Rams, which is a minor upset. Looks like the Rams are kind of going in the wrong direction here, but they did not score a single offensive touchdown. And the Steelers defense legitimately only gave up 3 points on Sunday. The Rams defense scored 9 of their 12 points. But, the Steelers defense is just playing lights out right now. Vikings looked great Sunday night. Kirk Cousins, had a solid game. Dak had a great game for the Cowboys too, but, Dalvin Cook just getting it done again. Seahawks and 49ers was a pretty good game on Monday night. A lot of people are talking about Russ for MVP, which I think Lamar Jackson might have something to say about that because he had another ridiculous game on Sunday. A lot of injuries. Matt Stafford not playing for the first time in like 162 games. Obviously, Pat Mahomes coming back, but the Chiefs still getting beat. And then, the Saints just laying an egg at home against the Falcons. Just a completely, ugly performance for the Saints. Really surprised a lot of people there. I think a lot of people, me included, expected the Saints to put up, a lot of points because they're at home playing against a bad Falcons defense. And it's just not really the week I think we expected from the Saints offense. Typically they're pretty money at home. But for them to come out and just score 9 points was, kind of completely, unexpected. Drew Brees got sacked 6 times, only threw for 287 yards, no touchdowns. Just not a great day for that New Orleans offense. Of course, they're going to bounce back. they're too good not to. But basically right now, they're a really, funnel offense where basically, Mike Thomas is getting, 46% of the target share in that offense. And, from a fantasy perspective, that's kind of what we want to look for, are offenses that don't necessarily spread the ball around. Offenses have a very concentrated target share, market share of carries, whatever it is. And New Orleans definitely fits that bill. Mike Thomas, Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray, and then you sprinkle in some of the secondary pieces. But those are kind of the 3 guys, with Thomas and Kamara just kind of owning the touches. But from a fantasy point of view, we're getting to that point of the year. Buys are obviously a big part of the fantasy season right now. Got a big bye week coming up, this week and next week again. And after week 12, we should be through the buys. But, a lot of injuries piling up. Devontae Freeman went down, so Brian Hill was obviously the hot pickup on waivers today. I did not have any shares of Brian Hill getting picked up. I do have him in one deep dynasty league. but wasn't really willing to go out and kind of splurge on Brian Hill. The Falcons have a mediocre matchup against the Panthers on Sunday. So, it's kind of hard to say what Brian Hill's going to do. But, Jalen Samuels didn't perform very well after a huge game in Week 9. Just didn't really get anything going last week. And, that's kind of to be expected because if he doesn't get it going in the passing game, he doesn't have a whole lot of standalone value as just like a rusher. Like his whole game is predicated on getting like 7 or 8 catches. So he's definitely like a PPR only to me, like type of running back for the most part. Christian McCaffrey got it done again this week. The guy's just a monster. Went for 108 yards and a touchdown. Kind of got stuffed to the goal line though there at the end of the game, but you just at this point you just lock him in for at least 100 yards rushing or just 100 yards total anyways. Derrick Henry looks like he's starting to kind of get going too. Doing kind of the same thing he did last year, 188 yards, 2 touchdowns against Kansas City. That Kansas City defense just can't stop anybody. They're really starting to look like a run funnel defense, which kind of creates an interesting situation, right, for like teams that go up against Kansas City because they throw the ball so much. It's hard to really just establish a run with them. So it's one of those types of situations where, the Titans were able to get the run going and stay in the game. But, honestly, when you're playing against Patrick Mahomes, you got to try to keep up. And running the football is not how we keep up with the Chiefs. But, Tennessee, it worked. It'll be interesting to see how that kind of works out moving forward. I sometimes I'm willing to bet at this point in the year on matchup. And of course, I think, with them playing the Chargers this weekend on Monday night, you can kind of see maybe like a big game from like, Melvin Gordon. Really like to see the Chiefs, man. If they could get Austin Eckler going, that would be absolutely awesome because Eckler was just so money whenever he was in there. It looks like they're pretty inclined right now to go mostly with Melvin Gordon. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what the Chargers, how they decide to attack the Chiefs. Another backfield situation to kind of look at that was interesting was Nick Chubb and how he performed with Kareem Hunt. And I think a lot of people thought that Chubb was going to lose touches somehow to Kareem Hunt. And he didn't. And he was actually way more efficient and effective when Hunt was on the field. And Hunt was actually able to be kind of like a good standalone piece as part of that offense. So I think as far as like Cleveland goes moving forward, I think the addition of Kareem Hunt is going to be huge for that offense. And it'll be interesting on tomorrow night to kind of see what they do there because, the Pittsburgh defense has been playing lights out. But I thought that adding Kareem Hunt to that offense would really give them a dynamic they don't have. Chubb's a great running back, but he just does not have the skill set Kareem Hunt does. And putting Hunt in the mix and putting those two in the backfield at the same time just gives them a look that a lot of teams cannot give offensively. So I'm actually a big fan the rest of the way of Chubb and Hunt. I think Chubb's a rock solid, probably RB2, RB1 guy, and I think Hunt definitely has flex appeal and probably, low RB2, depending on the week. And if something happened and Chubb would go down, I think Kareem Hunt's like a league winner. So, those of you that drafted him and kind of held on to him, it looks like you might be getting paid off here. Aaron Jones had another huge game, 3 touchdowns, and I think Aaron Jones is just legitimately good. They just refuse to give him 20 carries a game. He got 13 carries for 93 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's averaging 7.2 yards a carry, but they just refuse to give him more work. Obviously we would like to see him get more work, but, when you're piling up 2 or 3 touchdowns a week, you don't need 20 carries because you're going to score a bunch of points. Chris Carson just continues to do Chris Carson thing for the Seahawks. 25 carries, 89 yards. He's exactly what they want. Just ground and pound, run the ball, rock people's jaw whenever you come through the hole. That's what he does. And I was a big Chris Carson guy back in the summer. I will take my victory lap on him. I said he would be the running back to own in Seattle, and he is. I did not think Rashad Penny was a threat to him, and so far he hasn't been. And looks like, Damian Williams might be taking hold of the Kansas City backfield, which another guy, if you drafted him and held on to him, God help you. But, looks like you might be getting rewarded here late. So with the running back position right now, we've got the usual suspects. We got Dalvin Cook. We got McCaffrey. We got Aaron Jones. We got Chris Carson. Zeke, not been great. Saquon, awful. 13 carries, 1 yard. Just absolutely terrible for Saquon. And I think there's just some volatility there. Talking to Josh back in the summertime, I kind of recommended maybe if everybody thought you should draft running backs, maybe, go away from the field and, maybe look at the wide receiver position. But, it's just some of this stuff is so unpredictable. But I think if you look at the wide receivers that produced last week, Tyreek Hill, 11 for $157 and a touchdown. He, I think, is firmly maybe the number one, wide receiver one outside of Michael Thomas, the rest of the way. He just has more upside than anybody. Just because with the home starting the ball and the way his route tree is, he gets moved over the formation, and then he also, his ADOT is, off the charts. Whereas, Michael Thomas has an ADOT that's, in the 8 to 9 yard range. He's, if that, he's so close to the line of scrimmage. He thrives on volume. And it's kind of insane what Michael Thomas does, to get 13 catches for 152 yards. And that's kind of a ho-hum week for him. But that's his thing. So, for Tyreek, you don't get maybe, you don't get those volume weeks where he's getting 11 or 12 catches. But what you do get is, the big playability, the 150-yard days with a touchdown, 2 touchdowns, whatever it is. Because anytime, he's on the field, he's a threat to score. It doesn't matter, where they're at. I mean, they can be on the 5-yard line, and he's a threat to score. So, and I don't think anybody, back in August was looking at Tyreek Hill and probably taking him over Saquon, McCaffrey, Ezekiel Elliott, guys like that. But I think some people probably hesitate to put him in the first round just because of some of the other stuff he had going on. But and just from a talent standpoint, I mean, he's done it for so long, and him and Mahomes obviously have this big connection. So, I think he'll definitely maybe next year has consideration as being the first wide receiver off the board if he can stay out of trouble, this offseason. But a couple other guys that look good with Christian Kirk, Darius Slayton. I mean, Kirk just had a ridiculous game. Of course, Tampa Bay's pass defense is just so bad. I mean, they're just a pass funnel defense. They absolutely stoned David Johnson. I mean, David Johnson he was benched on Sunday, which I don't know why he would bench a veteran running back for a fumble. I mean, I think David Johnson deserves better than that, but Kenny Drake didn't do anything with his touches either, so I would look for DJ to get another chance this week. But, I mean, Kirk was just an animal. I mean, 6 for 138 and 3 touchdowns. I mean, he just torched them. Darius Slayton had a big week, which is his second big week in the last 3 games. He's had these 2 ceiling weeks, but then he sandwiched those around a 1 catch for 6 yard week. So, there's a lot of factors that point to Darius Slayton as kind of being the go-to guy for Daniel Jones right now. In that offense, especially with Sterling Shepard out, and he kind of had a boost with Evan Ingram out too, and I think, and that was another probably situation where the Giants basically had 3 guys that were touching the ball that day. Slayton, Golden Tate, and Saquon. And it doesn't sound like Saquon's going to sit, which that is probably the best move there for them, but it sounds like Saquon's going to keep playing, which is fine. I mean, he wants to play through it. Good for him. I don't think it's, I don't think it's the correct move, but they've got to do with him what they're going to do with him. But Darius Slayton is kind of an interesting case. I think there's a lot of factors that would point to him being more the go-to guy, but a lot of that hinges on Daniel Jones. I mean, obviously the matchup was pretty good, but I want to buy into Darius Slayton. I think if I had the opportunity to put him, on the back end of my bench, I would. But he was available in one of my leagues this morning, and he didn't go through on waivers, but he was still out there, and I did not pick him up. just because at this point in the year, I'm trying to handcuff some running backs, and it's kind of not a terribly deep bench league, so I did not pick him up. That might prove to be a mistake, but it's just I just hate to bet on that Giants offense, man. It's just not great. Devontae Adams, big game against Carolina. Obviously, when James Bradbury was out on Sunday, I mean, Devontae kind of became like a lock and load play, which I assume most people played him anyways, but like he was like a lock and load play at that point. Deebo Samuel, big games, held onto the ball more this week. Of course, Emmanuel Sanders going out had something to do with that. But, I mean, Deebo Samuel was, like, legitimately good at South Carolina. So, I don't think anybody should be surprised he's doing what he's doing because, I mean, prior to him getting hurt, like, he was, like, a household name. So, Deebo, it was good to see him kind of bounce back because he had a couple drops in week 9 that were just ugly. So, it's always good to see guys kind of come back from that sort of thing. And then, Randall Cobb on Sunday night was just like vintage Randall Cobb, 6 for 106 and a touchdown, which I think, Randall Cobb was like one of my favorite players all time because of like all the things he could do, like when he first came out. And, I enjoy watching guys like him play. I mean, I think there's just so many things he can do. He's just so dynamic. But it's, at the receiver position, it's one of those things where you see some names like pop in there and, James Washington had a big game, 6 for 90 and a touchdown. Jamison Crowder had a big game, 5 for 81 and a touchdown. Andy Isabella, they're getting him going a little bit more. Second game of three catchers, 78 yards. A couple weeks ago he had the big 80-yard play against, I think it was the 49ers on a Thursday night. So they're starting to get him going a little bit. Ronald Jones on Tampa Bay, he's a running back, obviously, even I bagged on him a little bit last week, but, 8 for 77 in the passing game, and he's never really been a pass-catching back, but they seem content on making him that. He had the fumble on Sunday, but it sounds like Bruce Arians today came out and said he's going to be our guy, so, Ronald Jones looking like a good pickup right now. But there's just so many good pass catchers out there, and on some of these teams, we want to look for the situations where we don't have, like, 3 pass catchers that are catching like 5 passes each. We want like these guys that are getting like 9 to 10 targets a game. So, and as we get towards playoff time, like those matchups and those things are going to become like more important. And you can't overthink things, but you also have to look and see what kind of volume guys are getting. Which is why I would say these guys are getting like 8 targets. Like Deebo got 8 targets. Like that's great. DJ Moore, he's another guy. It's been a pretty big target hog the last couple weeks. That's another guy I'd probably buy into. I mean, I picked up Curtis Samuel because I just believe in the talent. But that's those are a couple guys that I think you can kind of look at on that offense. Just because the way things kind of run there, it's like Moore, Samuel, McCaffrey, Olsen. Like those are the 4 guys that are going to touch the ball. And if the Panthers get 60 snaps a game, McCaffrey's going to touch the ball between 25 and 30 times. That leaves 30 touches somewhere. So, that's another offense I'd be fine buying into. At this point, that's kind of what we're looking for. Somebody we can kind of pop on our roster and just, hope for a big score. But I think, coming down the stretch here, I mean, Thursday night game tomorrow night, Steelers-Browns, I think that one's going to be ugly. I think it's going to be low scoring. But some of the other games this weekend, the Texans-Ravens game is going to be fun to watch. That'll be a good one. Saints and Buccaneers should be another good one. I would look for Drew Brees to bounce back this week, and just because the Buccaneers are so bad against the pass. I think Chargers Chiefs on Monday night is going to be a good one too. And I mean, honestly, I say this now, and I'm probably going to regret it, but I'm a little bit excited for the Patriots and Eagles game on Sunday. Hopefully, Carson Wentz can play well, because I actually think that the Eagles have a chance in this game. It's at home, 4:25 start, so they kind of get the late start, kind of a semi-night game. So those Eagles fans should be kind of ready to go. But until we get through these bye weeks, like we're going to be missing some important fantasy pieces. over the next 2 weeks. So, make sure you guys are picking up people, obviously to fill these spots and maybe taking a flyer on some guys to fill some of these spots. But, week 10, like I said, it was kind of crazy. But that's kind of where we're at in the year. We're going to see crazy, and we're going to see, things that we don't normally see. We're going to see people at the top of the leaderboards, so stuff, may not be used to seeing. Kyle Allen went for 307 on Sunday against the Packers. Of course, they had to throw a bunch, but that's a good example of things like that. So, we've just got to make adjustments on the fly, and by now, for most teams, we've got 10 games worth of data points to kind of point towards and work with, which is a good thing because the more sample size we have, the better off we are. But those are the things right now, where your team, is 6-4, 7-3, 8-2, 9-1, that you got to be looking at and kind of saying, okay, how are we going to navigate through the next couple of weeks, first off? And then, once playoffs come, how are we going to do this? And it's a grind, but the next 6 weeks are going to be fun. So we're going to enjoy that. And again, make sure that you're on, the waiver wire doing what you need to do. See guys are getting dropped because this is the time of year when guys will get dropped if they're have a bye week, whatever it is. So make sure you're paying attention to that. Keep your eyes peeled. Hopefully you're in contention, and I would think if you're listening to this, you probably are. So that's your Week 10 recap. We will be back here for Week 11 next week. So I wish you guys best of luck this week, and hopefully everybody gets a win. See you back here next Wednesday. See you guys.
The Josh Kirby on Sports podcast, part of the Mayo Please podcast network, is sponsored by Route 11 Chips. Make sure you grab a bag today inside your local Martin's, Food Lion, and Giant stores. And our new sponsor and fellow sports fans at PM Plus Reserves, providing reserve studies for homeowner and condominium associations in the Washington metropolitan area for the past 30 years. Make sure you check us out on all streaming platforms via the Mayo Please and the Josh Kirby on Sports podcast. You can also find the Josh Kirby on Sports podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, along with the Mayo Please on Twitter. Have any questions for the show? Feel free to shoot us an email at kirbyonsports@gmail.com.
All right, we are back. Thank you so much to Jason Kamlowski, as always, for Fantasy Football Files. Always appreciate what he does for the podcast each and every week. So back with Dan Dembski, talking some more sports news for you into the baseball realm. I'm sort of biased on this, but the NL Manager of the Year goes to Mike Shildt of the St. Louis Cardinals. I'm surprised about this move because, one, NL Manager of the Year, Davey Martinez, got no consideration for whatsoever. He wasn't even a finalist. The Nationals swept the Cardinals in the NLCS. And the Nats, I mean, you know the story. I've beaten it like a dead horse. 19-31 to winning a World Series. I'm not sure what other qualifications you need to become NL Manager of the Year, in my opinion. Dan, I know you had some thoughts on this NL Manager of the Year.
Yeah, here's the thing about it. I'll start with Davey Martinez. He got 3 second-place votes and 6 third-place votes. He was fifth overall in the grand scheme of things, with Mike Shildt, as you said, and then Craig Counsell was second. So the thing about the NL Manager of the Year award is it's awarded. The managers are usually selected before the season ends. Usually right before the playoffs.
Yeah, and why does that happen? I don't get that. Why can't they move it till after the World Series then?
There's a lot of writers and a lot of affiliates involved in the voting process, and they've got to get everybody's everybody's point of view, and I'm not sure if they all come in at the same time, if they take votes starting in, say, September, and they have to go all the way through October. I'm not sure the exact process that they take to receive the votes, but I mean, there was, for the AL alone, there were probably 25 or 30 voters on that side of it, and then I guess it would be the same probably on the National League side of things. So, my thing is they probably have to get it done early. And I guess at the time, the Nats, they hadn't won any playoff games yet. Now, if that runs through the postseason, I think Dave Martinez is undisputed as the National League Manager of the Year. But you also have to realize that taking in the full season body of work, and this is going to anger, I know, some of those Nats fans out there, the fact that they were 19-31, the fact that fans and so many experts were calling for him to be fired at that point in the season, I think hurt him honestly in the run of the voting. Of course, the Cardinals, the Brewers, the Braves, the Dodgers, they never really had that issue this season there because their teams dominated. So again, taking in the full body of work in the regular season, I don't know if Dave Martinez is the guy. But if you run it through to the postseason, I don't think there's any doubt. I heard someone make a good comment that he wasn't the best in the regular season, but he definitely was the postseason National League Manager of the Year, and I totally agree with that. But you have to take into account the fact that the voting gets done before the postseason begins, and they usually pick the most dominant team on the American League and National League side. So, and Schilt definitely did a good job stepping in. I think this is his first or second season with the Cardinals. I can't remember off the top of my head. But either way, he's done everything right so far. So I don't necessarily agree with him being the choice. I think even someone, Brian Snitker, I apologize, I probably pronounced his name wrong twice, was very deserving, and I also thought Craig Counsell was very deserving as well, if you consider the regular season. But that, I understand your frustration with Dave Martinez, but at the time when the postseason began, he probably wasn't the best manager in the National League, but obviously he proved in the postseason that he was the best, and he was the most relentless manager. And the Nats obviously dominated on the way to their first World Series, and he deserves most of, if not all of the credit for that turnaround from 19-31 to the World Series championship.
All bias aside, do you think it's a good idea to move the voting till after the season?
That they could do that. The problem again becomes, when, you'd have to move the award back. So people who watch the end of the season, obviously it ends near the end of October. The last couple of weeks in October, usually the season ends. So, I mean, you'd have to wait maybe until December to get the vote in. Are people really going to be paying attention to that? That's my question, and I don't know what the answer is. So I think the system they have now is good, but this is another example that it is flawed in that they didn't consider a season run, the postseason run, or anything like that. Yeah. I totally understand your frustration with that, and it makes sense to me.
Yeah, so some other postseason nuggets for you. Clint Hurdle has retired from managing, and the San Francisco Giants named former Phillies manager Gabe Kapler as their new skipper. So that concludes some postseason talk, including the NL Manager of the Year. last but not least, we will preview Week 11 of the National Football League, starting off Thursday night. Pittsburgh and Cleveland. That's going to be another division matchup. You got the Washington Redskins and the New York Jets, Atlanta and Carolina, Dallas and Detroit, Jacksonville and Indianapolis, Buffalo and Miami, Denver and Minnesota, New Orleans and Tampa Bay, Houston and Baltimore, and what you said, Dan, was going to be a very close game, Arizona and San Francisco, Cincinnati and Oakland, New England against Philadelphia, and the 8:20 slot on Sunday night, Chicago and the Rams, and Monday night, Kansas City at the Los Angeles Chargers, with bye weeks from the New York Giants, Green Bay Packers, Seattle Seahawks, and Tennessee Titans. Real quickly, Dan, any notable games you think will be good to watch for this upcoming Sunday?
Well, outside of my own team, of course, I kind of like the Patriots-Eagles matchup because we'll get a chance to see both teams coming out of a bye week. We'll see who has the advantage. I think obviously the Patriots are going to be the favorite in that game, but I wouldn't count the Eagles out. I also think the Bears and Rams is going to be a good game. And then I'm really interested to watch the Steelers and Browns. I think that's going to be a fun game. Obviously, I think the Browns will be favorited. But the Steelers are playing feisty right now, and that's certainly something that's going to be interesting to see and plays a lot of implications in our division. So looks to be a good week 11 in the NFL. I'm excited to watch the games, and I know we'll have a discussion on it coming up shortly.
I may be coming out of left field here, but watch out for the Chargers against the Chiefs on Monday night, for the Chargers to possibly give Kansas City a run for their money. New England,
that could be an upset.
Yeah, New England and Philadelphia, another good one to look out for. Houston and Baltimore, in my opinion, and and Pittsburgh and Cleveland. There's division matchups, but that about wraps it up. Dan, thanks once again for coming on the show. As always, any last words for our listeners?
Just give me a follow on Twitter. I post a lot about Virginia Tech athletics. Not only the games I cover, but just stuff that I think is interesting. At Dan the VT Man 97 on Twitter. Other than that, I really appreciate you having me on, Josh. It's always a blast. I love talking sports with you, and we always have a good time with it.
Yeah, always a pleasure, Dan. Thanks so much, and hope to get you on soon. As
Thanks
always, the Josh Kirby on Sports podcast is brought to you by Rat 11 Chips and PM Plus Reserves. We're part of the Mayo Please Podcast Network. And as always, thank you to MPT Now Productions, Dave Johnson, and JR Beats Official, as always. Make sure you catch us on all streaming platforms via the Josh Kirby on Sports podcast and the Mayo Please Podcast Network. And you can find us on all social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and we're also on YouTube and, all those streaming platforms. So till next time, Dan Dembski, I am Josh Kirby saying so long and peace out till the next episode. Have a great rest of your night.